Hello and welcome to Changing Cities Lesson 9 to 12. This session is now going to be focused on our case study of a city in a developing or emerging country, which is going to be Mexico City. So, to begin with, I'm just going to show you this image, which is of Mexico City. And what I'm asking you to do really is, using your knowledge about what we mean by inequality, can you spot any evidence of inequality from just this image alone? There are definitely two pieces of evidence that I can see straight away, but can you spot the two bits of evidence of inequality? Okay, I'm about to reveal the answer, so if you haven't yet found out, if you want to pause the screen, feel free. So the first and the main bit of inequality that I can see really is in this kind of red square here. So what you've got is you've got two different very contrasting types of housing. Here you've got very uniform, clearly developed housing, which looks of fairly high standard, very high quality, and it's surrounded on almost all sides by this informal housing, or shanty houses, slums, favelas, whatever you want to call them. So that's one thing. The quality of the housing is one factor that can affect the level of equality and lead to inequality in Mexico City. But also there's other evidence here. Just looking at the highway as a kind of a separation point, you've got on this side of the highway masses of green space, loads of trees, obviously some lovely clean air, access to again another what looks like a park up here, whereas over here it's far more high density and therefore there is less green space, which again will have knock-on effects to things like health, for example. So there you go, two bits of evidence of inequality in just this image alone for Mexico City. Now, Mexico City is our example and our case study for a major city in an emerging or developing country. And the reason we have to do one of these is because we need to have something to contrast our city in a developed country, which in our case obviously is Norwich. So Norwich is our example, which isn't in the revision guide or the textbook, is because it's a local example to us. The benefit of us using Mexico City is not only is it a very interesting city to study, but also it's on Seneca, it's in the textbook, and it's in the revision guide. So a lot of the exam board resources mean that you can really learn lots of stats and facts and figures about Mexico City quite easily. So what you need to do is, over the next 3 lessons, and 4 including this one, is compile a detailed case study on Mexico City. Now, it might seem like a long time, 3 or 4 hours to do. However, we spent about 6 hours covering Norwich, so actually it's half the time. Where you're saving time is you already know the definitions for a lot of the terms that you're going to be faced with when it comes to compiling your case study. So you know what we mean by site, situation, function, structure, migration, population, inequality. We know those terms. And because you know those terms, it means you don't have to spend time kind of refreshing your memory about what those things mean, and therefore it doesn't need as much taught lesson time. There are some differences, and there are some key differences between Mexico City and Norwich, mainly because Mexico City is in an emerging country and Norwich is in a developed country, and because of that you will get clear differences in both how and the priorities of making Mexico a more sustainable city, and also some of the impacts of the rapid growth in Mexico City, because Norwich is not rapidly growing, it's growing very sustainably, very slowly. And because of its slow sustainable growth, it's easier to keep up with the kind of increase in population. Whereas in Mexico City, they're kind of experiencing their industrial revolution now, and people from the rural areas are moving into the urban areas in vast numbers, and that is creating problems which you're going to cover. So hopefully by the end of the 3 hours, you'll be able to compare both Mexico City and Norwich with regards to similarities and differences. Okay, so there is an intro to Mexico City which is saved as a video on the resources in the JogVlogs folder on 365. And if you want to get a feel for Mexico City and how it might be a bit different to places like Norwich, then please do feel free to watch that video. Otherwise though, we're going to start to see just from these images what Mexico City might be perceived as being like. So firstly, we've already seen this is a more zoomed in version of that housing inequality that you saw. Some parts of Mexico City clearly have quite nice houses. You know, the ones on the right look like they're decent, they look like Spanish villas. On the left hand side you've got slightly less nice looking, sort of dilapidated sort of housing areas as well. Mexico City is a big city. You know, it's vibrant. You can see just the size of the area it spans, as well as the mountains that surround it, which create sort of air pollution problems, but more on that when you do your research. But it's also got a sort of a thriving business district as well. So it's a growing city, one of the largest cities on the planet. And you can see as well from this graph that Mexico City is suburbanizing. So you might remember a few lessons ago with Norwich, we looked at these terms: urbanization, suburbanization, counter-urbanization, and re-urbanization. Mexico City is kind of just in the suburbanization part of that. So it's a few years behind Norwich in terms of its growth. And you can see in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the inner city, the urban core, they're calling it on this graph, which is the blue part of the bar, is going up, it's growing. And that really was Mexico City undergoing its urbanization. And that's when the industrial kind of revolution of Mexico happened largely. Now, since then, and actually throughout that time as well, but since then certainly, the actual inner core, the urban core area, has shrunk in terms of its population, and a lot of those people that were living there have now moved to the suburbs as transport developments have improved and developments gone on, and also even more people have added themselves to the suburbs through migration from the rural areas. So you can see that green bar is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So Mexico City is very much suburbanizing at the moment, and I imagine further down the line it's probably going to start to experience counter-urbanization, and then even further down the line maybe re-urbanization too. This map indicates a little bit more about Mexico as a whole, and where you can see these different circles, it illustrates the number of murders that occur in Mexico City. Far higher murder rate, and remember this is just February to August of 1 year, so it's not even a whole year, it's literally half a year's worth of murder statistics, and you can see large numbers of murders taking place across Mexico City from that kind of half-year period. Not Mexico City, Mexico as a whole, but included in that is Mexico City for that 6-month period. Compare that to the UK and you're going to find massive differences there. Now there's a lot of reasons for that: poverty, drug cartels, trafficking, all sorts of crime-related issues. But just to show you the stark difference really between Mexico and the UK, which again is inherent in Norwich and Mexico City. Okay. So before you do anything else, there are key terms which you have covered, which I'd like you to go back over to have a little look at. You don't need to write a definition for all of these because some of them you already have in your notes, but there are ones that you don't have definitions for. Now, first thing is to get a definition for what an emerging country is, and I've done that one for you, but for the rest of them, I would like you to spend time just to go over and search the internet, but find a definition of these key terms: site, situation, rapid urbanization, those sort of things you should already be aware of. Social, environmental, economic impacts as well, you should be aware of them. Where I really want you to focus most of your time and attention are these three: NGO, or non-government organization. Work out what that means and get a definition of it, and also some examples maybe. Bottom-up strategy and top-down strategy. Now those two are going to be quite key. Knowing what those two things means is going to be key when it comes to the kind of latter parts of your case study for Mexico City. Okay, so pause the screen, get on and do that, and just research to make sure you know every single one of these terms and what it means, so that you fully understand the topic and the task going forward. Okay, when you're ready, unpause the screen and then we'll crack on with the main task. Okay, so the main task, which is going to last, again, I've mentioned this, 2 or 3 lessons at least, is the Mexico City project. Now, the project means you're going to get a really detailed case study, as detailed as you did for Norwich, all right, but for Mexico City. So you're going to be working independently, and again, give yourself 3 hours worth of time to do it properly. It might take you less time, but it certainly shouldn't take you any more time than 3 hours to do if you are working efficiently. The idea is you've got as much detail about Mexico City and knowledge about Mexico City as you do about Norwich from the last sort of 6 lessons that we've done on that. This means that you're set up really to be able to compare similar things and different things about different aspects of the 2 cities. Now there's information saved on 365, which is good for extension work, but also I'm going to record, I'm going to photocopy and put available to you, only you as well, on 365, the pages 170 and 179 of the textbook. Now, the reason I'm going to put the textbook pages on there is because it already puts in subheadings, a lot of the specific information you need, and it's easier for you to find everything you need if it's all kind of in just one place. If you're able to get a textbook or come into school to get a textbook at any point, then please make sure you do, and then you can photocopy those pages, but I will put those on and scan them into 365 so you've got access to that information as well. And if you also want to add any additional information, you can use the internet, as long as you're kind of being clever with how you search. Don't just rely, for example, on Wikipedia. Visit reliable news-based websites. Okay, you can present it however you want, but my strong advice is to use a kind of report format and just do page after page in your notes. As long as you're using subheadings, you should be fine, and it would take probably several pages of your notes. You should also look to contain a range of images, maps, graphs, where you can, because it will help your understanding and visualize really some of the things and some of the information you're looking at. And lastly, I want you to structure it so it's easy for you to revise from. So the video below is also saved on 365, which will give you actually some information already to start with. So if you want to take notes from that video, please feel free. And if you can't find the video on 365 or it doesn't work, the link doesn't work, then just type in that YouTube link that you can see below. Okay, so the sections I want you to complete. So watch that video first. When you're ready, unpause the screen, and then I'll tell you how I want you to structure this project. Okay, so I've put it all on one slide, and this slide really is going to be your main guidance for the remaining sort of 3 hours worth of lessons. There's a bit more after this, but that's really more of a summary. So you must include in your project one section on locational info on Mexico City. So that, if you've got the Highland Cow textbook, or if you've got on 365, is going to be pages 170, 171. And that's going to be site, situation, connectivity, importance or function, and structure. Now they are basics. They are just giving you good background about Mexico City, and you'll identify that, rather than it being built on a chalk, nice flat, fertile alluvium like Norwich is, you'll see that Mexico City is built in basically a big natural bowl surrounded by mountains, for example. So you've got a big comparison there. The second section, again, use subheadings for all these different sections, is about Mexico City's rapid population growth and mainly linked to migration. Okay, so migration in Mexico City has been both national and international, just like Norwich. Most of the growth comes from national rural to urban migration, but there is also some international migration into Mexico City. And again, you'll find all the information you need on pages 172 and 173 of the textbook. The third section is about inequality in Mexico City and quality of life. Now this will vary to Norwich's level of inequality, and will have slightly different characteristics, but the principles are still the same. Okay, so different areas of the city having better or worse opportunity, and the knock-on effects of that. So pages 174 and 175 of the textbook will help you with those. Now sections 4 and 5, these are where I see the most likely 8-mark questions coming from in an exam. So for changing cities, you're likely to have an 8-mark question, or you will have an 8-mark question, which will either be assess or evaluate, and it will either be for Norwich or Mexico City, or it could be a comparison of the two. Now, firstly, the impact of rapid growth in Mexico City, which is page 175, 176, are quite different from the impacts of growth on Norwich, because Norwich really isn't growing that much. It's done its growth. So the impacts of rapid growth in Mexico City are going to be very, very specific to Mexico City. And I don't necessarily see an 8-mark question from here, but I do see very likely 3 or 4-mark explain questions about the impact of rapid growth. So you should be talking about the development of shanty towns, crime rates, waste issues, unemployment issues. So things like that are really going to be from section 4, and that's one that you haven't covered in Norwich, so it's something that you need to pay lots of attention to, give lots of detail for. Question 5, or section 5 I should say, improving Mexico City. Again, you have got a section on sustainability of Norwich and how Norwich is making itself more sustainable, but it's going to vary considerably to Mexico City, particularly with these terms: NGO, bottom up, and top down. Now, NGOs, you've done your definition task. Non-government organisations are basically things like charities, Oxfam, WaterAid, Red Cross, whatever. Okay, they're not run by the government. They're funded through charitable means, and what they often do as voluntary organisations is they do things called bottom-up initiatives. So they really go and try and help small communities at the bottom level. Okay, so people that have not enough water, not enough waste disposal, not enough food, and they try and come up with schemes and ways to improve the quality of life for people through bottom-up initiatives. Now, you need to be aware of those specific bottom-up initiatives, and also you need to be aware of how successful they are or ways in which they have limitations. Now, because I'm talking about successes and limitations, you can very much assume that this is going to be nicely an evaluate type question. Evaluate the effectiveness of strategies to improve the quality of life in an emerging country. So you would then talk about Mexico City and say one of the strategies is through bottom-up initiatives, for example, and then give specific bottom-up initiative, identify how that has benefited people, give an advantage, extend it, stat, disadvantage, extend it, stat. And then your next paragraph might involve the next thing, top-down initiatives. Now, this does involve the government, so not charities. This is government spending probably large amounts of money on developing a big system, a big scheme, which is to also try and improve the quality of life for people in Mexico City. So that would be, for example, things like improving transport networks, or something called a green exchange, which is, you'll read about when you do your research. So your second paragraph, if it was evaluate the strategies used to improve a city in an emerging or developing country, you might then be saying, right, what have Mexico City's government done as a top-down approach? What did that involve? What was an advantage? Extend it, stat. What is a disadvantage? Extend it, stat. And then you've got a conclusion that you can say, right, overall, Mexico City is being improved for the quality of life of people in this way. I think it is successful overall, or I think it's unsuccessful overall because. Okay, so evaluate question definitely fits in well to that section 5, and section 5 very specifically is going to be different to Norwich and sustainability in Norwich. The next thing that section 5 could be is an assess question. Obviously 8 mark is going to be either assess or evaluate in this topic. If it is assess, it could be assess the success of improving Mexico City's quality of life, or improving the quality of life in an urban area in an emerging country. Now, that is where you're not giving me the positives and negatives of a specific bottom-up and top-down approach. It's where you're giving me a specific bottom-up and top-down approach, and then you're concluding which one of those two is the most successful, the most significant in improving quality of life. So again, you can see how assess or evaluate can really fit into that particular section of your project, and that's why I'd really like you to spend a lot of time and focus on section 5, particularly in your Mexico City project. If you want to try and do a couple of questions, 8 mark question practice on section 5, I would strongly recommend it. You could easily do the same thing for Norwich, but just rewind what I've just said, because I've mentioned 2 particular questions, one evaluate and one assess question that you could use, and I'm pretty sure on my revision PowerPoint or my revision video, 8 markers made easy, there is a suggestion of these particular type of questions and lots of others as well for the changing cities topic towards the end of that revision PowerPoint. So get yourself on that and try it, and any ones you do, send to me to mark for you and give you feedback, and I will happily do that. So use all those 5 different things as subheadings to try and break up your notes well. Focus a lot of time on 4 and 5 because they're the main differences between Norwich and Mexico City. And for 5, again, try and see how it could fit to an assess or an evaluate 8 mark question. So there are checkpoint boxes in some of the notes from the book as well. So if you want to see how you're getting on, if you can answer the red checkpoint boxes through your notes, then you're probably doing good notes. If you can't use your notes to answer those checkpoint boxes on pages 175 and 179, then your notes probably aren't detailed enough, or you're not really taking it in. So go back and revise. Now, this is going to take the next 2 to 3 hours. So I'm not just going to say pause the screen. Yes, pause the screen, but don't unpause it until really you've covered everything you need to cover, and that will be for the next 3 lessons worth of time for you. So please make sure you're spending a long time doing that. However, there is a summary that follows this, so this lesson is not done yet. So when you, for now, you need to crack on with that, and then when you are ready, pick up this video from kind of where you end now, and then we can finish it off. Okay, I'm just going to carry on. So pause that screen, get cracking on your project, and then in about 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours time, come back and we'll finish this lesson off for you. Okay, so well done for getting through that project. You should have done, if you're listening to my voice now, you should have completed your Mexico City project. What I'd like you to do, it says summary or homework. It doesn't have to be a summary or homework. You're working from home now, so do it now, okay? As a good comparison tool for you, what I'd like you to do is compare all of your notes on Norwich with all of your notes on Mexico City and summarize it in bullet points in the table that you see here. So, for example, what are the key similarities or differences between Mexico City and Norwich in terms of the site, situation, structure, connectivity? For example, connectivity is an easy one. Norwich is connected to the rest of the world by its airport, but that has to go via Schiphol in Amsterdam, whereas Mexico City, I suspect, anyway, has an international airport which links it to many other parts of the world directly. So that might be one thing. Okay. How does Norwich and Mexico City's urbanisation and population growth compare? Again, in this case, really I'm looking for you to say that Norwich is experiencing kind of counter and re-urbanisation, Mexico City is looking at suburbanisation. Population growth in Norwich is slow and steady and manageable, and sustainable, whereas Mexico is rapid. Migration, where are the main people coming into Norwich from? What is the most predominant international migration in Norwich from, and where's it going to? And in Mexico City, how is that different or similar? Inequality and quality of life, again, compare the differences, similarities. The main problems faced by Norwich and the main problems faced by Mexico City. And then those sustainable strategies. For Norwich, they're going to be slightly different kind of focus. For Mexico City, it's about top down and bottom up, and how really getting the detail in there is probably the most critical, because I genuinely see an 8 marker coming from that particular kind of final box there. Okay, so pause the screen. If you've done your notes well, this will take you, again, 20 minutes properly to do, so you've got a really good revision tool summary comparing the 2 cities that you've studied for this whole topic. When you're ready, unpause the screen, because there is something that follows which is quite significant. Okay, so just to summarise really this particular topic, I'm going to be assessing you, and I'm going to be specifically assessing Mexico City. If you've attempted an 8-mark question, like I mentioned here, evaluate the strategies used to improve the quality of life for people in an emerging or developing city, or you've done assess the strategies used to improve the quality of life in an emerging or developing city. That is voluntary. That's something I'd strongly advise you doing and getting feedback from me, but this one is your official assessment. So anything you do, any questions that you submit from these exam question sort of summaries, I'd like you to type them up, send them in to me, hand them in as an assessment, and I can give you feedback, because this is how really you're going to get your main grade for the end of this topic. So I'm going to give you exam question practice. Again, we hate exam questions, but as we're all going to be assessed through exam questions, it makes sense to practice them. You are going to be allowed to use your notes and your Mexico City case study notes to refer to, because what I really want you to do is pinpoint where it's going to be useful for your revision. So if your project is not very good, then you might find it hard to answer the questions. But what I do want you to do is keep in mind the time limit for the questions and the exam technique you're using. I don't just want you to copy down everything in your notes onto the exam. I want you to try and make sure that you are applying the right command word really to your notes. Okay, so this information is going to help you, but exam technique, you need to be applying that to really get a concise answer. Alright, so when you're ready, you can play on, and then you can time yourself, and I'll give you an idea for each question how much time you should be spending. So here you go. Here's the first one, a nice straightforward. Describe the growth of Mexico City for 2 marks. A bit of advice here. One of the patterns of description of Mexico City's growth is about the urban core, and one is about the suburbs. And I would very strongly recommend you go back in the PowerPoint, because we've already seen this graph, but also I would also expect you to focus on that word describe. I don't want reasons. I just want you to tell me how Mexico City's growth is varying across the years, and it's got a graph there, so use statistics, please. Okay, you've got 2 minutes, off you go. Okay, I'm not going to wait around for 2 minutes, so hopefully you've paused the screen. If you haven't paused it now, I'm going to go through some of the stuff advice to give you. Okay, now again, you can see there's a gap there on this screen. The advice is going to follow when you hand in the work to me. So please make sure you've done this, hand in the work to me. The next question is now slightly different. Same graph, but now it's explain one cause of population growth for a city in the developing world, or for Mexico City. So explain for 2 marks, one cause, you need a connective here, and I want a specific to a developing world city, a cause for population growth. Okay, so try and expand on your answers. 2 minutes, do that, time yourself. When the 2 minutes is up, you can move on. Okay, the next question. This one again is explain. And it's worth 4 marks, but you've got to explain 2 things. So again, each thing needs one connective to develop it. Explain 2 negative impacts of rapid urbanisation in a city in a developing or emerging country. So again, on Mexico City. 2 negative impacts of rapid urbanisation. Don't just tell me 2 negative impacts. You'll get marks for 1 mark for saying 1 negative impact and another mark for another negative impact. But I want you to tell me what makes that negative. What are the knock-on effects? Expand upon it. Okay, you've got 4 minutes for this one. Once you've timed yourself for 4 minutes, then you can move on to the next part. Okay, the next one, a dreaded 8 marker. Again, you should have seen this coming really from my previous parts of this lesson. You have studied a major UK city and a major city in a developing or emerging country. Assess the impacts of migration on the developing or emerging city. So this one, the first part of this, don't be confused by that. It's just telling you you've studied Norwich and Mexico City. But this question is assess the impacts of migration on Mexico City, the developing or emerging city. Norwich doesn't feature in this particular answer. Okay, so 8 marks. Assess the impacts. Identify 1 impact, describe it, explain how that affects Mexico City. It can be positive, it can be negative. Give me a stat. Then do it for another impact of migration. I would probably do 1 paragraph on international migration, 1 paragraph on national migration, and then a conclusion. Which one of those 2 impacts of migration, national or international, is most significant? Okay, that's a lot of advice I've just given you. Time yourself, 10 minutes for this one, please. Get that paragraph structure down and do your best, and then move on when you've timed yourself after that time. Okay, this last one, which to be honest with you is more likely to be an 8-mark question and described as an assess or an evaluate type question. But this one says bottom-up approaches have been used to improve the quality of life for people living in cities in developing and emerging countries. Explain, connectives, 2 ways, 4 marks, so 2 different ways extended once each, that bottom-up approaches have been used in a named major city in either a developing or an emerging country. So again, Mexico City, definitely, that's the only developing or emerging country you've studied. 2 specific bottom-up approaches, but you've got to explain them. Explain how they've been used and how they've helped improve the quality of life for people. Okay, 4 minutes to answer that. Be specific. You've got specific strategies in your notes. Use specific strategies in your answer. Time yourself for 4 minutes, and then off you go. Okay, you are now ready for the final question. Another 8 marker. I know I've been bombarding you, but the more practice you get, the better. So, you have studied a major city in either a developing or an emerging country, Mexico City. Evaluate the ways that the challenges of rapid urbanisation have been managed to improve the quality of life. So, Mexico City, 1 paragraph on maybe 1 management strategy So one sustainable management strategy that helps improve quality of life. Name it, describe it, advantage, extend, stat, disadvantage, extend, stat. Make it a bottom-up or a top-down approach. Then do for another paragraph the other one, bottom-up or top-down, whichever you didn't do from the first paragraph. Describe it, advantage, extend, stat, disadvantage, extend, stat, and then a conclusion which identifies overall, are the challenges of rapid urbanisation in Mexico City being managed well with regards to quality of life, or not? Are they successful? Are they a failure? Overall, be on balance, one or the other way, but you can also say, you can sit on the fence a little bit and say that some of the problems still exist. Okay, so that is the end of this session. What I'd like you to do, please, once you've completed all those, and this one's 10 minutes by the way, send them all in to me, or when you're next in school, pass them to me. I will spend a lot of my time marking them, giving you feedback, and really, because this is the way you're being assessed on Mexico City, what I'd really like you to do is make sure that you have given it your best and used your notes to the fullest of your advantage. Okay, so well done for listening, well done for completing this topic. I know it's been a bit of a slog, but hopefully you've learned a lot about changing cities, and you've done lots of exam practice, which prepares you really nicely for the end of topic test on this, which is going to follow afterwards. Thank you for listening, well done, and I'll see you next time for the next topic.